Welcome to the Scientist Sage Sangha with Wise Heart Wellness. I'm Nancy Anderson Dolan, and welcome to this interesting collection of people and ideas. Someone asked me to describe this and the kind of people that would like it. I never got an actual description, but if you want to tune in and watch, then you'll find out. And tonight we're talking about disillusionment. And this came up because I had a moment of severe disillusionment that happened. And I I can't even remember what it was, but I could feel it with my whole body. And it was like my world shifted. And I hadn't been given the word for the day or for the meeting yet. And so I was just asking about that word, and this experience came up, and I'm like, oh, that's what we're talking about. But it's a really important idea in our world right now as well. Just first for a definition, it is this feeling. It's a feeling. Disillusionment is not a thought. It's a feeling to start with. It's an actual feeling in our body. But it's of disappointment, of distress, being deflated in some way, loss of hope, loss of expectation. Disenchanted is one of the ways people describe it. And it's about having someone or something not be what you thought it was. And it's not generally something irrelevant to you. It's something that holds some meaning for you or some importance for you. And it might be something like a really simple personal thing, very specific, like a betrayal in a marriage. Or it could be a really broad social situation, like the idea of what's happening to democracy. Or it could be that it's just you wanted to get that chocolate bar and they don't make it anymore. So there's a huge range, okay? And what in every case, though, in every single case, the disillusionment is due to a perception of reality that turns out to be proven wrong or incorrect in some way or not exact. And from that it starts from getting the information that what we thought was going to happen or was true about something isn't that way. And it can be something that we thought, like a perception that everybody holds, like the police are always there for you, and that's where safety comes from. Or it might be something that is just my thought. When I was driving, I learned about a single yellow line, but I forgot that, and it got stuck in my head somehow that you couldn't turn over a single yellow line. And really, it's a double yellow line. So then when I recently, sadly, found out that I had got it incorrect in my mind, I was quite disillusioned. Like, should I be driving at all? Because if I got that one basic tenet wrong, maybe there's a problem. And so it can be something small like that and personal and just a distortion of some kind that we don't catch. Or it can be this deeply held belief that the current events or a particular person prove not to be like that. And life and reality don't really care about our beliefs, right or wrong. They just roll along anyway. And life will inevitably give us some of those things. They'll bring us this other part of our representation of reality that is not accurate, and it proves to be an illusion. And that's why literally the term is disillusionment. So we have an illusion of some kind and it's disproved. So it's a disillusion and we have to lose it. Now, the reason that it is important to think about is that it can feel quite literally like the ground underneath us has fallen away. And I was talking in a group of women last night about this idea of disillusionment, and we were talking just about what was a disillusionment moment you had when you were younger. And some of them were simple things and some of them were very complex things. But the commonality is that when they were disillusioned like that, that impacted how they functioned in the world and how they saw the world for the rest of their lives until the point that they were meeting with me at that particular moment. And we talked about some of the things that happened. It might have swayed like someone being in a family that really valued making a lot of money. And if they didn't go into work that made a lot of money, if they didn't succeed like that, they were sort of considered less than. And people took that illusion on themselves, that illusion of value. And it took a lot of work to actually work against it and strip that and realize it didn't matter, how much money they made, what marks they got in school, those kinds of things. Those were external to them about the value of their life. And then they could actually start listening to their soul and about what their soul really wanted. So the reality for their particular life. And sometimes it was more difficult. Sometimes it was an interaction with someone who was going to be safe that wasn't. And they took that forward in their lives, whether it was, someone, a protector like the police, or a parent or a teacher that typically we would expect to be supportive and protective. It turned out not to be. And so that would change and they would move into a different illusion. They would have the illusion that people were not safe, that you had to be very careful and you never knew which people were going to be okay. And so there's lots of things in the disillusionment idea that we work with. And there's also positive disillusionment. So maybe we think we are the center of the world. And then we find out we're not, which is actually a pretty good thing for most of us to find out pretty early on. And maybe we think that we're weak and we actually find out we're strong. And that's important to find out early on. So there's disillusionment isn't a bad thing. It is a difficult thing. And if we don't move through it, then it becomes a more difficult thing. And when we know that we can move through it, we can grow from it in spectacular ways. That means that we have to do a number of things. And you might notice this is similar to some other things I've talked about. Number one, we have to recognize that this has happened, that our version of reality has been interrupted, like a commercial or an alert on TV saying there's going to be really bad weather right now. And there will be. It's difficult. One of the people I was speaking with said, this is hard. I don't feel like I know who I am. And that's part of what happens when we get disillusioned. Just one moment here. And when we actually own up to it, we say, okay, this is happening right now. And I'm not going to try and suck it up. I'm not going to try and pretend it's not true. And I'm not going to try and pretend that it hasn't had an impact on me. So if someone has had a traumatic experience and they just pretend it's not a problem, then they actually get worse. Their illusion gets stronger and they defend against that. And that disillusionment that happened that they're not attending to interferes with their thinking and their life in ways they don't even know about and deny. And so it's really, really important to just keep waking up. Keep waking up. And we can't necessarily jump in both feet whole hog, but we can flirt with disillusionment. And so I know a lot of people that have had run-ins with authorities that haven't been kind to them. They've been manipulative and cruel, and hearing about these kinds of things is disillusioning for me. And when I hear that, the problem that happens for a lot of people happens to me. I think, oh, those people in authority, they're never okay, none of them. And that's not true. So this overgeneralization of a disillusionment experience is one of the bigger problems. And so if you are acknowledging it's there, then you have to acknowledge it's not the whole reality either. None of us have a grip on the whole reality. There are good teachers and there are bad teachers. There are good police people and there are people that are not as good. Racism and prejudice is out there. the differing political situations evolving around the world are very real. And so we have to deal with these things. And moving into that, though, we can literally move into that open space and feel what's in our bodies. That feeling of having the rug pulled out from under us. There's a man who talks about it is first they pull the rug out from under you, and then they pull the floor out from under the rug, and then they pull the ground out from under the floor, and then we're getting somewhere towards reality. And so those things, we can make it through those things. And as we make it through those things, our brains become more flexible and more open. And so I am a very big proponent of disillusionment not being a bad thing. It actually helps us sort of tap on our ego wall and bring it down a little bit, because we think that we know what's going on. And when we understand that we don't know everything that's going on ever, even in our own bodies and minds, we can relax into being present. And in fact, curiosity is one of the biggest ways to move through disillusionment. If I can get curious about what's in my body, if I can get curious about what I've been disillusioned about, I will find, say, that, there are lots of wonderful police people. There are lots of wonderful teachers. There are lots of ways to do things. So if I've had a disappointment where I wanted to do something and I couldn't do it that pathway, I can find other pathways. And so this idea of growing from our disillusionment, it's really, really useful. It's not this attack on our integrity or our sanity or any of those things. It really is this invitation from the universe to broaden our perception and understanding. And there is this healing that can happen when we open up to what is there. And this is built on an idea of that the universe is not out to get us. And so there's an illusion right there that we have to work with. And lots of people do feel that way, that they're waiting for the next bad thing to happen. And if I can put down both, that I don't live in with a Santa Claus God, so some people say, that will just fix everything all the time and it'll all be good and okay, and I won't have any pain. I can move into that reality that life can be difficult, but I can also move into the reality that life can be very amazing. And there are many good things that happen, and there's good things that come of difficult things. I can move into different realities, because we all really define our reality as we go along. And as long as we're not defining things like I can fly off the top of a tall building, then we're good. But the exploration and the curiosity that we take into disillusionment is what really helps us move through it. And we notice our egos that don't want to accept that this is the way it is. They want to rail against it, and they want to know everything. We don't want to be made a fool of. We don't want to feel unsafe. There's so many things that our ego wants to protect us from, but it also puts us in that lack of reality. So the spiritual way towards this really is allowing ourselves to open up into a bigger, higher, different version of ourselves. And not that I am better than someone, but how can I be more open to the teaching that the universe is bringing me? In shamanic terms, they call them initiations. How can I open up to the initiation that is in front of me as I get, my delusion gets drifted, taken away from me? And it really is. We're on the cusp of making a new discovery and a new adaptation to life. And so but the trick here is it will come with pain. Lots of times we grow through pain more than we grow through pleasure. And so if we can take that pain, let it move through our bodies, and I'm not talking about welcoming it, but receiving it, just not trying to ignore it. Because what happens when we do that is things get worse, and they get worse fast. So people do shy away from them. things like the hard, difficult things like having a new vision of slavery is a really challenging thing. The new vision of fairness and the unfairness that's out there, or the prejudice, things like that, that are difficult to grasp, and you want to make them better right away. And they're not going to get better right away. It has taken hundreds of years to change some of those ideas, even a bit. But we can be a part of that as we change our own ideas. So it really, I encourage people to really understand that they can have a bigger view of the world and move into those practices that we've talked about for lots of things. Releasing it in our bodies and being willing to understand that whatever I go forward with in life has a possible positive outcome and a possible perilous outcome, and I can move through either of them. And so as I go through with that, some of the emotions come up. And again, if I can greet the emotions, like I am full of fear right now after having this moment of disillusionment. And that might keep me from, leaving my house. It might keep me from getting in relationships. It might keep me from looking for a different job. It might keep me from, taking up the invitations that come my way. There's lots of things that those emotions of disillusionment keep us from doing. So it's so important to recognize the emotions and name them and release them. And then there's 3 questions that I suggest for people to ask. What is real right now? And so I may want to think, I worked with a number of young Indigenous adolescents and younger kids, and we went to a swimming pool. And I really at that time did not think that racism was that big a thing in my perception. And because I hadn't run up against it very much, but I have all my kids and we're in there, we're having a wonderful time. And then people were saying awful things to these children. And I was caught so much by surprise. It was so challenging. And I really needed to respond quite quickly and be cognizant that what I thought was real got ripped away real fast, and I was really shocked. And I had to respond to what was going on really right then. And it was so challenging. And especially the way my kids that were with me responded to it, they just sort of shied away like they've been hit. And I first went to the kids and said very clearly that this is not right, this is wrong, that person is, not in a full state of mind, and this is not how everybody thinks. And this is really happening. This difficult thing and this attack towards you has happened. And then we talked about it after, and there was such relief on their face to just be able to talk about it. So it wasn't another thing that was just stuffed down, and that's what we all need. So this idea of what is real right now. I'm hurt from something. I'm worried about this idea of my delusion. I don't know who I am at that moment. Those kinds of things are really useful. So talking about it and the idea of what's real right now. And that brings things into a different space for us. And it keeps us from running back into the closet, so to speak, and not letting that reality unfold. And then when there's a little more room to breathe, about who am I? And this is a lovely practice to write down who am I and then write a response, and then write down who am I and write a response, and just keep doing that for a little while. And it changes things. And I, like in this example about being facing prejudice, I literally, I'm an idiot that I didn't think that was happening, was one of the kinds of things I wrote. And I'm a shocked person that this is still happening like this. And as I went through it, I just really understood that I was just a normal person in a particularly privileged position because of who I was and what I looked like and that sort of thing. And I could not feel ashamed about that. And I didn't feel frightened. I just found a new balance about who I am and how important I felt that was, because it hadn't been important to me because I didn't understand what was really happening. But it became important to me, and it strengthened me, and it made me a more aware person. So I got to have some growth, and that's the kind of growth we're talking about from moving through disillusionment. And then the last one is literally, how do I move forward? And so I was talking with someone who wanted to apply to something, and they found out they didn't have what they needed to apply to it. And so right away it was like, oh, I have to let go of that dream. And I was like, let's just talk a little more about that. And when we were talking about it, like, it's just, how do I move forward now? Not that I can't go in that direction at all. It's how do I move forward? And it's hard sometimes to move past those things. But the more that I roll through those questions, what's real right now? Who am I right now? How do I move forward? I find new things. And they might be surprising sometimes because they might be something opposite to the object of disillusionment you've experienced. And the disillusionment just opened you up wide and able to let in more things. So this idea about curiosity is all of the rolled into that, all the way through, acknowledging it, curious about actually what happened, and releasing whatever is in your body about it, old stories, old emotions, and then sitting into what's real. And so I'm going to stop there, I think. Well, I'm going to mention two other things. The idea of passing it on. Battered women are one of the really amazing examples here, because they have an idea of what relationships will be like, and they move into that, and they try and hold that idea when that's not what's happening. And they keep thinking, if I just do this or if I just do that, and then someone else is actually trying to feed them illusion, and they take it in because their version of reality isn't proving to be true either, and they want it to be true. And so we sort of collaborate with people sometimes to have our delusions proven true for us. And it's really challenging to move out of those things. And then it starts to change a little bit, and there's like a picture, just a quick peek. And then people go back, and then they come forward again. So this is not a linear process. Just looking at the politics in the US right now, and even where I live in Canada, and that move forward, and then that sort of delusion seems to be stripped away a little bit, and some move back. And so this is not a quick process. It's an ongoing process in every area of our lives. And it could be that tomorrow we'll find out we should never have used electric toothbrushes. We don't know what's going to happen next. Life is variable, but we can move through each moment of disillusionment and come out clearer and stronger and with more presence in the world. And that's what I wish for all of you. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes here at the end to just let yourself open up to things that you might be avoiding, truths that you might need to let in. Or you may find there is an old experience or story of disillusionment that comes up for you. And you might recognize where it has altered the way you interact with the world. So just contemplate this idea of disillusionment and where it might be in your life, where it might have shown up, where it might have helped you, where it might have changed your trajectory in ways you didn't like. So just hold it, the idea, and see what you might need to hear about it or learn about it. So take the required deep breath to slow down. And feel free to go off camera if you're live with us. And if you're listening to this later, feel free to lay down, sit down, really get comfortable. I find the best way to think about uncomfortable things is to get my body very comfortable. And then as you breathe, just open your mind to that question. What does this idea of disillusionment have to teach me? Are there moments from the past where I became disillusioned that I'm still holding on to? They still feel like they're stuck in me. As you breathe, just imagine creating more space, more comfort to look at these things. More expansion with the idea of disillusionment. You may also find areas where you found it good things, where you've been perceiving negative realities, and let that part of the continuum in as well. You may have found as you put down fears and resentments that you found softer places to land in the world. Many people find when they work on developing a less harsh critic of themselves in their head that their illusions of what they are like start to shift. They may feel stronger and friendlier. Illusions can keep us bound up away from life. We may use positive illusions and practice them, practice thinking them and experiencing them until we find experiences that match them. And using illusion in this conscious way can be helpful. Working towards that ultimate disillusionment and acceptance of that reality. And we often find when we work at letting go of negative illusions, that the world is not as challenging or unfriendly as we had come to believe. So for the people live with me, I'll let you sit with that and say goodnight to those of you that are watching this later. And thank you so much for watching. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.